Hard question, right? And maybe the most important question. Can you have an A-plus player who really just wants to make a lot of money?
I think so. I don't see why not. I think like you have a tendency for, at least what I've seen, is A+ players often have more purpose than just that. But again, like, at the end of the day, it's, to me, whatever the motivator is, like that is what I'm going to align on with my rep as an individual. And so, to me, it's more so about understanding what that motivation is rather than caring what that motivation is.
Today, we have Tanner Cookson on the show, and Tanner is the director of sales at Alternative Payments. We met really recently, and I was speaking at an event, and we were hanging out talking about sales nerd stuff and leadership, and he had just really interesting things to say, and I'm super excited he's on the show. Welcome to the show, man. I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah, thanks, John. It was awesome meeting you the other week. Like, honestly, it was, I'm super happy to be here. I think it's so fun. Sales to me is one of the most compelling careers in the world. And, just kind of the conversation we had about teams and how about building culture and confidence and all these elements that make up great sales processes. It's, to me, that's what this life and my career is all about. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Right. I think we're going to have a lot of very interesting tangents to explore in the conversation. One place that I really want to start, right, because this show is really about adapting in different situations so we can get the growth and do what we need to do. You came into the role that you're currently in as the sales leader, is my understanding, right? So you were in leadership in the old sales role. Is that true?
Yep. So I was in my last company. I managed the SDR division there. So we had a big size team. We were all across the US and Canada, spread out, and then came into this role kind of as a, player coach type perspective. I was responsible. I had the role of everything, picking up the phone, doing cold calls, closing deals, having some leadership elements. I was really just kind of like one of those players that just, tried to do it all.
Okay, there's going to be so much to talk about the player coach thing, because like everyone has very strong opinions about that, myself included. But so going back a little bit to the last role, leading that team of SDRs, can you talk about some of the challenges and maybe changes of perspective or things that you had to go through, like moving into that leadership role? Because there's the hard component of, the numbers and the results, but there's also the soft side component of culture and enabling and motivating and stuff like that. Where did you struggle stepping into that like leadership management role in the old company, if anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is so much to learn and so much to comprehend. I probably spent every waking hour of my day just trying to figure it all out and trying to understand like what to wrap my head around in terms of, how do we position the team? When I moved into leadership in that last company, it was a crazy time for the company. Within I think it was within like a month or two of moving into that director role there, we had acquired 2 or 3 other companies. And so we brought this SDR team that was, 6 or 7 people at the time, and then it immediately doubled overnight. And we had all these different remote teams and all of these, all of this consolidation of now bringing in companies that were all their own individual startups and now bringing them under one SDR organization and trying to figure out, what the hell is our identity? What does that look like? Like, who are we? I think that was the hardest thing that, for me to figure out, and it was also wrapping up, like each SDR team kind of had their own approach on like, how do they book meetings? How do they run their cadences? What is their sales style like? What are their expectations? So I think the hardest thing was, again, like I spent a lot of time with everybody, each individual, and then as a team, trying to understand like, what is your goal? What's your expectation? What do you believe in? What's the culture you want to see? How do we merge all of that together to take 4 or 5 great cultures and combine that into one? And I think that's where I had it was the most difficult time, but the most rewarding time of just figuring out, what to really do and where to go with that.
Man, like I think I personally feel like that's like a really cool moment in time, right? Because, like I'll work with teams and people on the same team aren't using the same process or the same labels or the same, titles for any of this stuff, right? But like in this situation, it actually makes sense, right? That they were doing it very, very differently because it was a wholly different organization. Did you lose anyone during the transition? Were they like unable to kind of either put down the ego, put down the old habits, right? Really kind of get on the same page and do it from the same way that the team was? Did you lose anybody during that transition? I guess is the better, more succinct question.
Yeah, like I think we lost people before anybody gave it a shot. And I think that happens with a lot of like acquisitions and merges that happen within companies where, a lot of people are, it's a scary event, right? Change is super scary for individuals, especially if you're coming from, a startup organization and you're moving into something bigger. It's really scary to then think about like, how that job might change or how expectations might change or what compensation or quota or process or team might look like, 6 months down the road. And I think what happens to a lot of people is they get more afraid of the change and they step out before ever giving themselves a chance. So, what we found is that we had a lot of people, or not a lot, I would say we had a couple of people step out before that process change ever even happened. And then once that process change happened, we really retained pretty much everybody from the organization. Everybody that kept there, ended up staying not just for a year, but multiple years after. And a lot of people we were then able to accelerate into different career paths and different opportunities within the organization. So I think a lot of flourishing happened. But again, that early stage part of like when that change just happens, people freak out. And it's just kind of about teaching and coaching on, how do you manage that change internally and use that as an accelerator rather than a detractor from a career perspective.
Holy crap. I love that. So kind of looking at the question differently, how much did you potentially, if anything, pull away from what they were doing as far as their cadences, their outbound, their motions? Did you pull anything from them and integrate that into what you guys were doing? Is like, was it, and if you did, sorry, two-part question, was that intentional of like trying to build some team cohesiveness, or was it like, hey, this is just outperforming, and so we're going to take, we're going to steal this, we're going to use this, we're going to borrow this for the sake of the team? Or was it like, okay, what do you guys do really well? Let's try to do that. How did you get to that place of meshing all these different cultures?
Yeah, I think how I really looked at, how I really look at teams in general, just in sales is micro awareness, not micromanagement. And so like one of the things I was really just always tried to be extremely diligent on and extremely like focused on was that whenever we were working with like any team and just building this out, and this goes for the exact same thing today. I think I've taken this through, all of my jobs, and I've tried to keep this mentality, but it's not about like taking somebody and plugging them into a single process and then telling them exactly what to do, which is that micromanagement, right? Do X number of calls, do X number of emails, do X number of this activity, do it in this cadence, those are the metrics to be successful. There's some elements of that help people get off the ground and running. But when you're bringing in experienced teams, it's more so about teaching them how does each individual, can they get to a point where they now understand their own KPIs and they're coming to me and saying, hey, this number of calls equals this many demos for me, right? This many of emails equals this many demos for me. And then what we tried to do is just like take all of those different ideas. We had some teams that were like literally Excel sheet and cell phone and just like pick up and dial away. We had other teams that were like, HubSpot cadences that were, super advanced and they're tied into marketing. We had other teams that were like, using different platforms like Salesloft, and then had a whole different set of cadences, and maybe they're email heavy and call light and, all these different things. And so we just tried to really, first map it out to like the buyer journey, right? Like what are the buyer expectations? How do we, accelerate? Each product sells into a little bit of a different audience. So how do we make sure we're matching up there? And then, taking best practices from all of these different organizations and then trying them across different teams. So we spent a lot of time. There's a ton of things I learned. Like the one thing I consistently harp on for any new person that joins, that joins my team or I talk about in sales, it's like, I don't know, what is the best technique for next month. I know what worked last week, maybe last month, but I don't know what works this week. I don't know what works next month. We always have to be like pushing and trying new ideas because it's only from testing that we're going to get better results.
Interesting. Man. Okay. So, the tech nerd in me wants to really kind of dive into like, because I imagine that, some people are on a spreadsheet and just like calling all on cell phones, and other people are like HubSpot driven and everything. So meshing all of that and getting everyone on the same page is like just like a unique, I think, cool puzzle, right? Because everyone has their ways, but I'm also a big fan of not giving everyone the same kind of KPI goal, right? As far as like, you must do 100 activities and you must do 100 activities, right? Because it removes any drive to be better at the job, in my personal opinion, right? I just got to do these 100 dials, right? And then when you get put on write-up because you're not having enough conversations, right? We've almost missed the boat is how I think about it. I'm a big fan of like a midpoint KPI being the first one, like in meeting count, discovery count, demo count, right? Something in the middle of the process. So that way there's some room for the individual reps to figure out, okay, what volume do I need to do to hit this metric? And, that's uniquely difficult because it does create a lot of empowerment in the individuals and there's room to mess up. But I also think that they carry the goal better as opposed to just kind of being like, my coach called it being an at leaster, right? You're not doing super well, but at least you're hitting the metrics, Mm-hmm. I love that. How did, with all these different, because if I'm hearing you correctly, like the acquisitions were not all like in the same market, right? Or maybe to the same kind of audience, right? It might've been selling different things to different people. Is that true? Or was it about like making a better product for one market?
Yeah, it was like the same market, but for different people within that market. So like for
Cool.
IT, for different divisions within that market. And so, your buyer was actually different people within the organization. And so,
Very different people, it sounds like.
Very
That's
different
interesting.
people. Yeah, yeah.
Huh. Okay. So any other tips for people who might be a sales leader and inside of a company that's doing lots of acquisition? Any other things that you have found or tidbits of knowledge that might help someone else out if they're a sales lead in a very growth oriented by acquisition type of business?
I mean, it's a hard thing to kind of wrap my head around, and like I still made 1,000 mistakes and had a tough time. I think that the biggest thing is just like change is a great thing. It's the perception of change, right? Most people just perceive change as being scary. They're unsure about their job. One of my biggest mentors, he says, he tells me like all the time, he's like, live like, just kind of say like, fuck it. It's like,
Yeah.
like you have like nothing to lose in this career. Everything is icing on the cake. Right. And so you have to live with that mentality of like, not saying like, don't care and nothing matters, but it's the opposite of like, don't be afraid to make decisions, to make choices, to be assertive and to purposefully like drive things in the right direction because you're scared of what could come in the change. Instead, like say, whatever to all of that and just go into that organization and just do the best you can with the best intention. And good things are going to happen, especially if you involve the people around you and think of this as a team effort, whether it's the SDR that just started, 2 days ago, or whether it's the person that's been there for 10 years and now just got acquired and now they're in your umbrella, right? All of it every single person is valuable. Just bring them all in. Don't try to do it all yourself. Do it as a team, and just go with that mindset of fuck it, like let's just try to figure this thing out and let's try to build something unique together. Let's make us all owners in this process. I think if you can go in with that, there's not a world where you can't be successful, because you're going to make mistakes. Everybody is, but you're going to be able to work around them because you've got the whole team behind your back.
Okay, so I was going to change gears, but you brought up something there that I just have a couple of questions about, right? So SDR is a grind, right?
Yeah.
Very, very activity driven, very activity heavy, right? And it's also an entry level sales role, right? So a lot of times we're bringing in people who are brand new to this role. They've never been in a sales role before. And there's lots of reluctance and avoidance, right? Do you have any tricks or tips that you have uncovered about helping new like SDRs get accustomed to that kind of grindy cadence of doing more activity than they think they need to really kind of backfill with intention? Any tips about getting people started, or to kind of have that mindset shift of you're going to need to do more than you think?
I love this topic so much. I'm so glad you asked about this. I think there is this massive difference between motivation and drive, right? It's like, and the way I think about this, right, is like people that train for a marathon or do sports, like there's a lot of sports analogies here, but nobody wants to wake up at 6 a.m. and do a run because they've got a marathon coming up in a couple months or next year. But they know they have to be able to get to that spot. And it's the people that are driven, right? Whether it's raining, whether it's cold out, whether they woke up tired, anything like that. It's the people that are driven that are always going to find that success, right? And I think what a lot of like sales mindset gets to, and a lot of like what sales teams get to, is like that short fuse motivation, which is like, hey, hit this activity metric and there's a prize, or let's do this spiff for like most amount of calls or most amount of X in a single day or a week or whatever. But that's just very like short-term results, and it's not sustainable, and it's not really teaching the rep anything. And it's also just teaching them like, hey, like I only need to do this when I get rewarded for that. But that's not actually true at all. You need to do that every day of the week. And so, what I think about is just like, how do we, first of all, hire for driven people, right? That really just fundamentally are those A players, and whether they have experience or not, it doesn't matter. But do they show up every day in life, like looking to wake up and do what needs to be done? And then the second part of that is like, just enforcing that and talking about that and being open about that, within each of those, conversations of just like, how do we get how do we get there, right? It's not a motivation thing. It's just about like really coaching around that repetition of like, put in the work and the results will follow, and kind of like disassociating the results from the work at first.
Absolutely.
Where you're just focusing on the work and worry about the results, 1 or 2 months down the road.
Oh man, it's so interesting to me because I remember being a rep, and they would come in and be like, offering a gift card for some carrot that I didn't care about at all, and I always hated it, but I also know that like I'm not the standard personality type for sales roles, right? So part of that constant skepticism that I have keeps me from buying into some of these situations, right? And so that is very, very interesting to me. So, okay, so question then, right? Do you think that siloing the sales approach, right? Having BDRs, SDRs, and AEs over here who close business, like versus full cycle, right? Just to kind of put in these two very, very distinct different categories. Do you think we're improving sales as a role, as a function, as a craft by doing the siloed approach? Or do you think that being full cycle is ultimately better for salespeople and organizations?
I mean, it's a tough question. I've been I've been in organizations that do both, right? My last company was very siloed, and so you'd have your SDRs that were just responsible for the pipeline generation side, and they were all partnered with AEs that would be just fully on closing, and so they didn't book any pipeline. My company now, our team is very lean, we're very nimble, we're agile, we're a startup, totally different dynamics, right? Where you don't have that consistent flow, you don't have that budget that you used to have, and now we're in a position where all of us do everything. I'm about to jump on a cold call block here in 45 minutes, and I'm going to be picking up the phone with all my reps. So we're all responsible for everything. In terms of what is better for who, that's the question that the organization has to make. I think ultimately the way I feel about it is that if you're in a position where you're have an incredible product market fit, you're highly successful on outbound, and you have a really good marketing flow, then absolutely makes sense to have a sales team just closing deals. If you can fill that pipeline, then hell yeah, like have at it, like get really good at closing those opportunities, and just run through those all day. But again, if you're in more of that startup environment, you're still kind of figuring out where to go, and you need to create that opportunity and to go out there and to be on the ground, boots on the ground, make those dials and have those conversations. Then we've all got to play our role, we've all got to play our part. At the end of the day, the way I've seen is like almost all of the most successful AEs, whether they're directly responsible for it or not, they all pick up the phone, they all make those dials, they all generate that pipeline. So doesn't really answer your question. It's a hard one to answer, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, it drives me crazy, this idea that people are moving into sales because and I had a conversation recently, right? Guy's never been in sales before, but wants to be in sales, and he wants to come in as an AE, right? And so he was like, can I pick your brain? I was like, absolutely, happy to help anyone who wants to move into sales. Like, let's have a conversation. And I told that guy, I was like, look, if you don't spend any time prospecting, your people are going to know it, and they're not going to be able to trust you when you try to give them help. And if you have someone who's supposed to be like setting appointments for you and building pipeline for you, and they're not doing a good job, like there is no passing the buck, in my opinion, if it's done well, right? If you're an AE who has an SDR who's setting for you and they're not doing a good job, you're supposed to be in there backfilling that situation, right? Showing them by example what it takes to fill that pipeline, as opposed to like, hey, they're not doing a good job, but it's not my fault and everything. But I think I think that makes it's becoming harder and harder to do because it is so siloed, right? And some of these people that have been AEs for 3, 4, 5 years, and their prospecting chops are out of practice, right? They are a little rusty. And so it's one of those things of like, do we pull like a really good closer, right? Someone who can close business and make them do well. But like if we, it's a very hard, interesting challenge to kind of work with. I'm just curious as to your take on it.
Yeah.
Now, before we hit record, right? And something we talked about whenever we were hanging out was this idea of like, you called it the invisible finish line before we turned on the recording, which I think is such like a unique name. But you were working over there, and the way that you talked about it to me was like you just knew that the work was done, and you knew that it was time to like go find like something else. And this is honestly a big reason of why I work independently and work for myself, because when it's time for me to go, it's time for me to go, right? Because once I figured out the puzzle, and it's no longer a challenge for me anymore, like I start to get dismissive, I start to get a little bored with the situation. But I don't really hear most other people talk about that unless they've made the decision to go out on their own, right? So can you talk a little bit about what that finish line felt like for you? How did you know that it was time to move? Was there writing on the wall, or was it just, you just kind of woke up and decided?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like all of us have invisible finish lines all throughout our career. Every single job we enter, has this kind of what I believe is like that goal of what we're all trying to get to. The hard part is like you never know when you're finished and when you're not finished. And for me at my last company, look, I started there as an SDR. This kind of goes back to your last point, but like I was, an AE at the job before that, and then I went back to an SDR to relearn, some of that skill, and then work my way back up, because I think that's the greatest spot in the organization to learn and to become successful. And so, I did that and then worked my way up, and then, eventually became the senior director for the BDR division. And I had been in that job for, 2.5 years. We had acquired probably 6 or 7 companies at that point. We had taken the business from 10 million in ARR to 75 million in ARR. It was massive growth. We built this phenomenal team, and I went to the office one day on Monday, and we did our team call. And I just sat on that call. It was an hour call that we were doing as our like Monday stand up across the whole organization, and I didn't have to run it. I sat there and I was like, I didn't have to run it. I had this phenomenal team of SDR managers that I got to raise up through the organization as well. The team was really mature. We had like incredible talent across the team that had all been there for a really long time. They were tenured, they were experienced. We were hitting all of our metrics. It was really good. And I just remember coming across that call and being like, wow, like, I think that's my sign. And that was a really, difficult thing to do. And I remember, talking to my fiance, my wife now, and I was just like, you know what? Like, I think that I've really accomplished my goal. And I just felt like so good about that. And it was at that time where I was like, okay, I think it's time to start this all over again and put myself back in the fire. Because, it's like careers go to die when it's comfortable. Yeah. And like the moment you feel comfort is ultimately the moment to either go to your boss and say, hey, I need more, or it's the moment to, say, hey, it's time for the next thing. And so I just remember really feeling that and being like, okay, I feel really good about, what we've got here.
God, yeah, so I tell lots of people that I've had just way too much coaching, because I'm now like you, right? If I feel something, I'm trying to figure out why, and I want to be aware of it. And it's interesting because, some people are like, oh, John, how long are we going to work together? It's like for as short a time period as possible, because I'm trying to give you what you need, and then I'm going to go find something else. But I also think that lots of other people take the other approach of like, cool, I've done the big lifting. Now I just get to manage, right? Yeah. Which like on both sides of that conversation, I have moments of like, like complacency, right? And on some level that bothers me, but on the other level, it's like, it's a job, it's a living, you've done the big part, right? And now there's some consistency here, because there is something beautiful about having a consistent lane as a salesperson, right? Because there is so much other chaos that we have to kind of like figure out how to thrive in. At least having the knowledge that the role and the team and there's product market fit and everything else like that, that's one less thing to deal with. How long did you sit with that feeling of like, okay, I feel like I've done a good job here, and I think it's time to go do something else?
3 months.
3 months. Okay.
3 months.
Interesting.
Yeah. I remember sitting there and I remember like starting off the year. It was in January. I think I ended up leaving in April, and it was, again, I just, because I had to reaffirm it. I was like, am I jumping the gun too early? This is so comfortable. Like, why wouldn't I stay? The company has an exit strategy. Like, there's things going on that's like giving you every reason like to just kind of hang out and take it easy. But I made this promise to myself like years ago. It's like I'm just never going to be. I never want to be comfortable in a position, right? I don't think that. Reward doesn't come from like not taking risk in life. And I think there's this fun element. And I think a lot, it's, to be fair, like there's some situations where not everybody can afford that, risk in their life, right? And I think I was in a very, I feel, very, very gracious, and grateful to be in that position because, my wife and I, we like rent an apartment. We're in Toronto. We don't have kids. We have a dog. Like I'm young, she's young. We're in that position where like, it's okay to step out and nobody else is counting on us. We don't have kids counting on us, and so I do feel grateful to take that risk, but it is something that does really mean a lot to me, which is like just always push yourself. I think it's the same thing with hobbies and stuff outside of work as well. It's like push yourself to always be a little bit uncomfortable, and I think great things will come from that at some point.
Man, I love that. Like, and I appreciate you talking about the fact, like lots of people are willing to do the slog of a startup because there is an outweighed exit, right? Opportunity and stuff like that. Was it hard to walk away from that idea, right? Because there are some people who are like, cool, like I've earned this, right? No harm, no foul, right? If you've figured out a way to get to market and have some repeatability and consistency in the sales motion, like you're doing a good job, right? Like you are due part of the exit, right? If you're around for that long. Did you have any concerns or struggles about walking away from potentially bigger exits and bigger money if you'd stayed?
A little bit, but honestly, like, not really. Like the way I feel about it is just like life is too short, to wait on things. I think like, stuff is going to come if it's meant to come. But if you like keep on putting yourself in those right situations with the right at bats with the right companies, like it'll pay off. And I don't think there's any need to wait around for somebody to miraculously hit a home run. I think you got to be the one like stepping up to the plate and just trying to do it. And if it works out at that company, great. If it doesn't, great as well. You learned a ton and you can take it to the next one. So I don't think it's about waiting for those like, those lottery tickets. If they come to you, that's amazing. But I just don't necessarily view it that way.
Interesting. Okay. I love the perspective, right? Because, especially sales side, right? You can get in and slog and build it and not make it to the equity point because of all the reasons that stuff happens, for sure. Now, okay, so you go and you talk to your boss, right? And you have the conversation. Did you already have another role lined up, or did you exit there and take some time? Like, how intentional were you about figuring out what direction you wanted to move in for the next role?
To me, the timing of it all really worked out. And again, I was pretty lucky for this situation. So, this new role, again, I met with them super early on, and, we had been having conversations, since the start of the new year as well. And really it was just a matter of just kind of communicating to both sides and being like, hey, I think I'm ready for this. I think it's time. And so I had that new role kind of already lined up. It was just a matter about giving, tons of time for both organizations to make that change successfully and, create a succession plan, transition plan for my former employer and everything like that. So, just really trying to I was intentional about it. I wasn't, like, hey, it's time for me to go, and then just kind of submit my resignation and move on. I think that I love risk, but not that much risk. And so it was just kind of, the timing worked out on both sides.
So moving into the new role, right? How different was it? Did you have any stark moments of awareness of like, oh, wow, this is very different, or I'm going to have to like show up as a beginner to really learn from these other people as opposed to like showing up thinking I've got it locked and loaded?
Oh man, it's like different to this day.
Really?
It's insane.
Interesting.
It's so different. It's so challenging. Like it's but in a great way. Like I know nothing. Like I know absolutely nothing. Like coming to this role, it's like, wow, I'm starting from scratch again. Like I have to learn this industry, I have to learn this market, I have to learn like the sales process, the product, all of this stuff. It's super hard, but like in that it's so fun. But again, it's just like it's just every day. If you approach every day as a beginner, like I think that's a great thing, right? And I still try to approach every day as a beginner. Like each sales call I do, every time I'm on a call with the rep and we do a demo or we do a discovery call or anything like that, after every single one of those calls, we both pick up the phone, we talk to each other, and we say, hey, what went well, what didn't go well? And I say that after every call, and we figure it out together. And then we figure out an action plan. There's so much to learn all the time. It's not just top down, it's bottoms up, it's side to side. Like there's learning everywhere. So I think it's just, a beginner's mindset is a beautiful thing, especially at a startup when nobody's got the answer, right? We don't have the answer yet. Maybe we'll find it one day, hopefully we find it really soon. But it's like just that you're only going to get there if you take that beginner's mindset and you try a bunch of new things and you just consistently try to pivot and learn.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So the team in the role that you're in now, like, did you build that team from the ground up, or was there already a team in place and you came in as the leader?
There's already a team in place. And so there's a team in place. I think there is like 4 of us in total, 3 or 4 of us in total. When I joined on, there's been like some transition, some people have left. I brought on some new people as well. And so we're probably at this like 50-50 split right now with people that I've brought on versus people that have been here already. And I think, that's been, that's always a lot of fun too, because you're, working with people that have been there before you started, and then, people that come, after you hire them, which is interesting.
So coming in and dealing with, like, I think that's a pretty unique kind of situation, because a lot of times your house has been cleaned sometimes and you're there to build out a new team and stuff like that. I'm also obsessed with the idea that like new leadership has to kind of come in and earn the trust of the people on the team, right? Did you have to do anything specific or unique to get these people to really buy in and trust that A, you knew what you were doing, you weren't just someone who got moved to sales, and that you could actually help them out?
Yeah, 100%. Like the first thing is that I didn't assume anything. Like I didn't assume any role, any leadership role, nothing. Like I came in saying that, hey, like, I'm going to be an individual contributor here alongside you. And I just want to learn alongside you. Like there's nothing, I don't know the industry. I don't know the process. Like I come in with some experience, but not all of it. Everything is new. Each sales role is a little bit different. And so I really just came in like just trying to be, again, like that teammate, that really good teammate, where I'm going to come in, carry a bag. I'm going to try new things. I'm going to work with the process that's already been built. I'm going to do everything. But just not assume any leadership until I've earned the right and until people start coming to me. And I think that's, really important going into a new organization, is like, you can't just come in and manage. Like you have to come in and pick up the phone, and you have to show that, you're capable of doing that. And it's also important to, leaders should always keep themselves sharp. Like I remember, my old job, I used to always make our SDR managers do cold call blocks, and I would do them too, because you just have to stay sharp. Otherwise you lose the edge, right? And, for us to be successful as leaders and in sales, like we always have to be on the leading edge of what makes the most impact. And you don't do that by looking at a spreadsheet. You got to be 100%
agree. Like, that's probably my biggest pet peeve, is that there's lots of people throwing around like GTM and sales enablement and coaching and stuff like this, and they've not done the role enough to really have enough to really like coach or help anyone else. So I was curious if you'd kind of run into that in the new role. Okay, so let's talk about player coaches for a minute, okay? Because to me, it comes down to this kind of impossible question of, do I go hit my goals, or do I spend the time with my team to empower them to make sure they hit their goals? Like, do you deal with the weight of that?
I do, yeah, a lot. And it's a difficult thing. Like for me, it's almost like, I think it's almost like intuitive to some sense of like when you start to feel, okay, like I know that if I spend all this time with my team, that we can get 3 times the results of that what I can do on my own. And you have to kind of figure that spot, that inflection point out on your own. But I remember coming to that point, only just like a couple of months ago, and, transitioning to that. And like, as, if you have a team of 3, 4 people more, like you can absolutely spend some own time closing your own deals and things like that. But like, if you're depending on the team, if they're junior, if they're, starting up and growing, like you need to spend a lot of time with them, and you need to be super, super intentional about that. And look, like the leader of a startup organization is hard. It requires a ton of work. Like you have to put in a hell of a lot more hours than you want to. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of like you have to find a way to get shit done at the end of the day. And I think that's like the mindset I've taken is like, yes, like you get to that point where you realize, okay, I need to invest a ton of time with my team because I know it's going to produce 3x the results that I can on my own. But that being said, you also have to do some stuff on your own to just like keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. So I don't know, it's a balance, but it takes a ton of work.
So, okay, diving into this a little bit deeper, right? Do you think, because like I know some people, they'll say, okay, as the player coach, you're responsible for this much weight, right? Goal, quota, or whatever, but the team needs to be hitting this. Like, do you think that is a better way to kind of lay it out? Or is it just like, hey, team's got to hit this amount, however you get there doesn't matter? Like, do you think one is better than the other for a player coach situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on like the organization. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like I think keeping things simple and aligned with business goals are the best way to run things, right? So if you have somebody that is an up and coming leader and they have the ability to move into that, full-time role, then ultimately I think like getting to the business objective, the core business objective at the end of the day is the ultimate goal. And how you get there, I don't think that it necessarily matters. Like I think it's about, finding like where it's hard being a leader. You have to find out where is this half an hour going to generate the most amount of revenue for the company. And if you can stay like hyper focused on that and be creative on terms of how you maximize that time and get the most out of it, I think that's a really good thing. And you kind of do that by having like that team goal of like get to X as a team.
So less of like you have this goal as the player, and the team has this goal as a coach. It's just more about like the top line. We got to get here because we need to get here because this is what the business needs kind of situation.
Yeah, like that's a way, and I could be super wrong about that, but that's just like my opinion on it. And I also think that's super important for sales teams too. Like I think that, in general, kind of creating good sales culture, a lot of sales organizations are just built on individual quota, but then at no point does anybody ever talk about top line objectives for the business. And I really do believe that, either on a monthly or quarterly basis, you should always be talking and presenting on how the team is doing based on that top line objective. As a team, we should always be focused on that. Sometimes one player is going to have a down month, other players are going to make up for it. At the end of the day, we all want to be aiming for that top line objective and exceeding on that. And I think really aligning on that helps build a good culture too, of one where it's not like, cutthroat competition, but one where we're all just trying to help each other get to that company objective, I think is really critical.
And like now we're getting into the part of the conversation I'm most excited about, right? Because you and I really kind of like dropped like 7 layers into our conversation. When we started to talk about like motivation, competitive natures, and really kind of enabling that the right way. And it's unique in sales because it's like, okay, just focus on your number, just focus on your number, just focus on your number. But if you're not doing the stuff that you're talking about, okay, here's what the company needs and everything. There's no ownership over anything other than that like individual performance, right? And so how does a leader do a good job of getting people driven for their individual stuff, but still being thoughtful of what the team needs, right? How do you keep the competitive drive in there and good natured without it kind of being like zero sum and people are working against each other?
Yeah. I think like first and foremost, it's about having like a very defined and clear vision of what this company is trying to become. What are the goals? What's going to get us there? And then working backwards, right? How does each member then contribute to that objective as a team? At the end of the day, like all of us in all of our careers, the things we care most about are like, what are we really here for? What's the purpose? What's the objective? Why are we doing what we're doing? And are we growing and learning and being challenged? And I think that all funnels down into like that top-down vision of like, where is this company going? What are we trying to do? Why were we created? What are our objectives as a business? How do we get to that vision? How do we execute that on? And then what does each individual contribute towards that goal? And it's just working backwards. And then be repetitive, if nothing else, like all the time, right? Talk about what is that top line goal, and then what is each person responsible for? And then in every meeting and every, pipeline call or every, quarterly all hands that you do, like just be very, very consistent with how is the team contributing to that top line? Are we exceeding that as a team? Then how do we work backwards? And how does each person, how are they all accountable for that? I think it's just making each individual feel very, very connected to the company and where we're going.
Interesting. Yeah, I have so many questions around this area. Do you do anything unique or special from a team building perspective to try to make sure that you're fostering that good natured competitive nature, but also keeping morale high and not letting it turn bad?
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the things that I really love doing are like team spiffs rather than individual spiffs. And so rather than creating like this competition for, most demos or most bookings in a week or a month or whatever you want to do, I love doing stuff around the team, right? If team gets to X, like we all get rewarded. So I love doing stuff like that. I also love just doing like internal, sales workshops and like quarterly meetings where we actually go through as a sales team, like what have we been able to achieve as a team, and kind of working backwards of like what I mentioned before. But I think that's just it. I think it's just like repetition and like just, always communicating that, hey, like this team objective is the most important, and we're all like extremely accountable for our contribution towards that team objective. So you don't lose sight of what that individual contribution is, but you also don't create so much internal competition that nobody's sharing best practices with each other, and you're just actually detracting from the success of what it could be. So that's kind of that. Those are some things I do around that.
I love that. I had to write down team spiffs because like I've never heard anyone really talk about that before. And I don't think you can just go up and be like, okay, when the team does well, we all do well. I think it's important that you're doing the other stuff as well. Like you're coming together as a team, you're taking the additional step of making sure that the team is aware of what the team goal is, and not like, I think all of that leads to the team spiff thing being something that works well for you. That's awesome.
Exactly. And then the one thing too that we do weekly as well is like a kind of like a KPI assessment, where every single week our sales team will get on a call, and then we'll take a look at all the work that was put in. So all the data, right? Every call that was made, every demo, every conversation, every email, open rate, reply rate, everything. And the team will go in and say, what did I achieve this week? Where did I fall behind? Where was I leading? What can I do to influence, my numbers for next week? How do I get better? And what were some lessons learned? And so like, at the end of the day, we have that team mission and vision, but each of us are hyper accountable. And so you do have to create that accountability, as you mentioned, for the individual, because, you cannot in no way, shape, or form, if you want to create an A+ team, can you have a B- player that's just reaping the rewards of other people?
And okay, hard question. Right? And maybe the most important question, can you have an A+ player who really just wants to make a lot of money?
That's a great question. I mean, I think so. I don't see why not. I think like you have a tendency for, at least what I've seen, is A+ players often have more purpose than just that. But again, like, at the end of the day, it's, to me, whatever the motivator is, like that is what I'm going to align on with my rep as an individual. And so, to me, it's more so about understanding what that motivation is rather than caring what that motivation is.
Oh, I love that, honestly, right? Like I really like how you talked about that, because, I think dangling money is a sign of bad leadership. I think dangling spiffs, right, just to see if it's going to work, is probably also bad leadership. But I also think that just putting people onto performance plans that are like not going to actually cause a change is also bad leadership. So I'm with you, right? Like I care more about like what the money's going to do for you and like how you're going to spend it and what does it unlock for you, than like you really need to be bought into the vision of this thing, But if you don't have a good attachment to the why, right, to use the Simon Sinek label, you're probably not going to do the hard things,
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. Okay, so some other questions for you, right? We're getting into the rapid fire portion of the interview. What are you most excited about as far as sales as an industry? Like, do you see anything that's coming, or maybe tech that you're playing with, or changes that you're seeing that get you really excited about the next 10 years of being in sales?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's this kind of phase we're going through right now, which is like this, I don't want to say like contraction of sales, but it's like this forcefulness where only the best are going to survive, in my opinion, of kind of what we're going through right now. To me, that's really exciting. I don't think it's this, kind of like unlimited budget resource that it was 3-4 years ago, where everybody would just spend buckets and buckets of money on building these massive teams that would all do average results. Like, to me, what's most exciting about sales is now we can get into like the core, really, really narrowing down of the exceptional people and moving forward on this like new basis, and I think AI has played a huge role in this. I think a lot of the automation tools have, really taken sales back a couple of steps. And I think it's just about, reframing what sales looks like over the next, couple of years. And I'm super excited for what that could look like.
What's your pet peeve about sales or marketing or being in tech or being a salesperson? Like, do you have anything that you see or you come across that just makes you like roll your eyes?
Uh, it's a good question. I think like a lot of it is kind of based on the automation. I think like, a pet peeve of mine is that sales can be exceptionally lazy if you want it to, and if you want to take easy routes, but it's just never gonna produce the results. And I just think there's, a lot of tools out there that create more noise than value. And so, that's kind of my pet peeve is just the proliferation of tech stack that does not help
Yeah,
you move the needle forward.
I feel that. If someone was coming to you today and they wanted to be in sales and they were asking for a book or resource, someone to follow, where would you point that person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love the whole Challenger Sales, like Matt Dixon series. So like the Challenger Sales, the Challenger Customer, and the new book they just wrote, The Jolt Effect. Like to me, that's like the core fundamental. Every salesperson should read that trio of books. It's extremely valuable. I also think there's, a billion podcasts and things to listen to, ones like this. Also, there's so many more out there. I listen to like 30 Minutes to President's Club, the mental selling. No, there's a lot of ones out there they can find. It's not about which ones you find, it's just about doing it. And it's just about reaching out, learning, reading. If you like reach out to people and in your city or in your community and ask them to meet up. I mean, that's been a huge game changer for me too, is like, oftentimes like I have no network until you create one. Right. And so it's just about creating that and investing in that and going out and, if you do that and you're dedicated about that, you're obviously going to find a sales role.
I love that. Right. I mean, it's so funny whenever I sometimes will see someone on LinkedIn and they're like, guys, you don't have to come into my DMs, just apply for the job. And it's like, you don't want a good salesperson. If you want them to just go through the easily filterable process that you've laid out, right?
Exactly.
Like to me, it's this like weird, like you think you know what you want, but when you get the person who's just going to be responding to like RFQs that don't ever close, you're not going to be happy with the selection you made in that spot, which I just think is like they don't know what they don't know, which it just makes me giggle every time. Okay, so if someone is an independent contributor, right, they're a salesperson on a sales team and they want to take that step into management, what are some things that you would tell them to like start doing now, whether it's books or courses or just like actions inside the workplace to really make sure that that's the direction that they should be going in, right? Because some people move into sales management who are not really going to be great managers without a huge developmental curve. And then I've seen people move into management, realize that they don't like it and step back down. So how can someone kind of vet out if that's really the direction that they want to go in?
I mean, do the work before the title. Is like, what I always say is like, do stuff. Talk to your manager. Make sure they're very aware of like what your career path looks like and what some of your goals are, and then try some stuff. Right? Ask to host some meetings. Like there's host a book club, host a like coaching session. Right? Like do the things that a manager would do without having any responsibility and title for that role yet. I think if you put the work, before the reward, again, same thing in sales, like good things will come from that and you'll learn a lot, whether you like it or not. Like the sales manager role is tough. Like a lot of it is like, almost therapy. Some of it is like, there's managing a ton of like turbulence and change, and you probably take away even more time or way more time than you've ever had, and you may even limit like some of your earnings potential. So you really have to like believe like this is it. Like you just have to know it's not something you're really like, oh, I'd want to do this like for the title or for X position or for the power. Like it's like, no, to your core, you have to be that person that's like striving to make the team better. And I think it's just recognizing that and getting a coach and getting a coach and helping them help you get to that position.
Interesting. Okay. Um, Let me think. What other rapid fire questions do I have for Tanner while he's here? When you're thinking about, okay, so on your current team, are people siloed or is everyone kind of full cycle?
Everyone's kind of full cycled. We have one BDR that's just responsible for the business development side, and then we'll likely scale that out as we grow as well.
Interesting. Okay. When I want to go back to this because I just want to make I think that this is one of the biggest struggle points, right? Is getting new people moving with the right motivation and right intention. And we were kind of talking about this earlier of getting people motivated by purpose and not just money, right? Have you found, especially with like new hires, right? People coming onto a team, how do you figure out if there's someone who's purpose driven and someone that you can help like drive forward? Have you found anything unique or special in your interviewing or hiring process to kind of uncover that?
Yeah, I think like you kind of mentioned it right there. Like you have to figure out and make that judgment call long before they ever join the organization. If you do it after, there's incredible amounts of risk there. But to me, I'm blanking on the name of this, but I really love this interview process of, and it'll come to me at some point. But it's like going through like each stage of their life, from like call it high school all the way to where they're at today, and what was every decision made, and why did they do it? And if there's strategy and purpose behind each of those decisions, that person is probably purpose driven. If they're just trying stuff out of a whim without real structure or strategy, then that person probably isn't purpose driven. And so I think it's just like that style of interview has really helped me kind of source out like who's got that real A plus potential versus who's going to come in and maybe be a cog in a wheel, but not necessarily drive the business in the way we need them to.
Okay, I love that. I really like the idea of drawing out the interview process and seeing, right? Because like I think most people will have a period of time of being unintentional, right? But then shift happens, right? Whenever the work really begins to matter. That's a really great idea.
And if you're unintentional, are you aware that you were unintentional during that time, right? It's a great way to source out that awareness. Like great salespeople are super aware. A great salesperson isn't going to wait for the manager to say, hey, let's do a training on, discovery. The great salesperson is going to say, hey, here's my discovery. Here's what I think I did really well. Here's where I think I could improve. What do you think? Can we hop on a call? They're hyper aware, right? And so you really want people to have that same kind of sentiment throughout their, reflecting on their own path so far, even if they're just in college or high school.
Do you think it's on leadership to enable that ownership, that kind of like lean forward, find a hill or find a hole, fill a hole kind of situation? Or do you think the person brings that quality if they're the right person?
It's got to be both, right? I think that person that comes on to the team, has to have that like core personality or that core character trait about them where they're going to like lean in and they're going to dig and they're going to, really be like thoughtful about what they're doing. But then the company has to enable that, right? The company can't put a person like that, like an A plus player, into this structured process that's super rigid. So I think it's just a combination of both. It has to come from both sides.
Okay, so dual-sided environment. I like that. Okay. Now that you're not an individual contributor anymore, like based upon the conversations we've had, this one and the one in Nashville, like you're a student of selling, right? Like you just appreciate it as a craft. Like, do you still think sales is your main craft, or do you think it's more the leadership stuff? Like, what do you think is your home base as far as the thing that you're putting time into improvement on?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's like it's a dual side of it. Like I think to be a great leader in any discipline, you have to really understand the discipline, and you have to be always learning. If you're not setting that tone, and if you're not leading by example there, it's hard for people to get on board, right? So I do think it's a mixture of both. Like, I spend a ton of time, like my passion, everything I love to do is in leadership. Sales, I love the craft as well, but it's a little bit more work for me. But I know it's the work I have to put in for my team, for us to all be on the same page, for us to all be learning together. Because if I lose that aspect, then I think it's easy for the team to lose that aspect as well.
Interesting. So speaking to that idea of wanting to figure it out, like wanting to find the next puzzle, the next thing, do you do anything specific or unique to kind of maintain that mindset for yourself so that way you can lead by that example?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I said this earlier too, but it's like staying in the game, right? Staying in the game, staying sharp on demos, sitting in on tons of sales calls, picking up the phone, doing cold calls with your team, going to conferences. Like it's just about being there in the environment, alongside them. Is to me really critical, especially at an early stage company where you don't have any like middle management and structure and hierarchy. You really got to be feet on the ground, working with everybody.
Interesting. Okay, I appreciate that. Do you do anything weird or unique for yourself because you think it makes you better at either one of these crafts of sales or leadership?
To me, like, to show up as a really great seller or leader or anybody at your company, at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself first, right? And I think it's about like, one, like kind of the core pillars for me are like activities, right? Like I love to challenge myself. We talked about this like, the other week in Nashville, but like I just started jujitsu 5 or 6 months ago. I love challenging myself there. I love to play tennis. Like I need to have that aspect for me to then feel like my cup is very full. The other part is like my family and my friends, right? Am I making sure that I have some time to spend with my family, to spend with my friends, to do things, to maintain proper balance? And then my health, right? Am I investing in my health, in what I'm eating, in what I'm taking in and what I'm putting out? Like, I think you really need to be very intentional and thoughtful about, are you filling your cup to bring then your full energy and attention to work?
Man, I love the fill your cup that creates the space to really be driven around it. Because I give a lot of space for people to just show up and vent because, if you don't have a space to complain about the things that are outside of our control, it's super easy to become jaded, right? So I give a lot of space for people to come in and complain and just get it off their chest, right? But I also talk a lot about like self-care, right? Like the things that you need to do so that way you can be a high performer in the job. But I love that concept of like purposefully filling the cup as opposed to like, marooning yourself on an island, kind of situation, because I think most other people try to go the other way and then you burn out, which isn't helpful for anybody at all.
No, exactly. Right. It's all about that balance. And I've seen burnout and I've felt burnout, and like, I know what it's like to, dedicate 100% of yourself to a job. But again, it's short term and it's not sustainable. Right. And if you can figure out a way to find that balance and take care of the things that are most critical to you and that fill your cup, and if you can do that, then I believe in this state where you're not going to feel like you need that 2-week long beach vacation. You're going to feel very, very happy and driven about even showing up to work, and you can still do those things, but you don't feel like you need to have that. And I think that's a great place to be in.
Last question, then I'll let you go. Super thankful that you were able to hop on and share this time with me. But going back to burnout, what does burnout look like, feel like? How does it show up for you that indicates that you need to go do something to fill that cup?
Yeah. It's different for everybody. I've seen like really bad cases of it. For me, it's just like it's not wanting to be there, right? Like it's not putting in the extra mile. It's kind of like, reverting back to the bare minimum, closing down the laptop at 5 o'clock or whatever it is. And, I find it's also just like you lose aspects of the important areas in the rest of your life, right? You start to lose like that touch with your health. You it's like kind of that mentality of like you're thankful it's Friday and you dread Monday. I think like that feeling of it is the early stages that you're not on a sustainable path. And I think it's about figuring out a solution very, very quickly, because you're not going to be effective and you're not going to be able to contribute if you're excited for the weekend and happy the weekend's over. I love the weekend, don't get me wrong, but it's that core feeling that is, I think, that indicator.
Tanner, man, thank you so much for hopping in here and talking about this. Like, we had such a cool conversation, and like, I left, because we were in the middle of the event. That was the first night of the event, and after we spoke the whole night, I was like, man, I want to talk more about this. I have these questions. So really, like, very, very grateful that you were willing to hop in and do an interview with me, man. You have any last words or anything you want to leave with everyone before we get back to being productive?
No, I mean, thank you for bringing me on. It's been a ton of fun. Like I love talking with you. I think you bring some amazing insight and some amazing thoughts in the world of sales. And so I'm honored to be here. And for anybody listening that wants to reach out, I mean, I'm always available. So find me on LinkedIn, and my number's there, my email's there. Hit me up, and happy to talk with anybody that wants to talk.
Awesome. Tanner, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.